Sovereign Sisters, today we're going to dive into a conversation that's very deeply personal, especially to myself, widely misunderstood, and more relevant than ever in our healing journeys. What I'm referring to is psychedelics, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy as it relates to healing ancestral trauma. I don't know if you've noticed, but right now we're in the midst of a psychedelic renaissance from ayahuasca to psilocybin. These ancient plant medicines are being rediscovered as tools for trauma healing, for spiritual awakening, and for ancestral connection. But the thing is that with this resurgence comes like a really serious question. Are these plants truly healing us, or are they opening doors to trauma that we may not even be prepared to face? I mean, we've seen stories of profound breakthroughs, but also of people spiraling into confusion, like Elvira and I spoke about in our spiritual psychosis episode. They even bypass the real work of healing altogether, which is not good. And here's where our conversation is going to take a way different approach. We're not here to promote psychedelics at all, nor are we to dismiss or here to dismiss their potential. Instead, we're bringing this nuanced perspective of how do we navigate ancestral healing in a way that is safe, that is sustainable, and that is truly transformative. Now, I have personally experienced the power of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but I've also seen firsthand the journey does not end with the ceremony. True healing comes from integration. Yogi Bhajan, who brought Kundalini Yoga from the east to the west, taught us that we can naturally activate DMT through our Kundalini Yoga practice, giving us access to higher states of consciousness without any external substances. And today, my co host Elvira and I bring just another perspective, a very essential one that reminds us that these altered states are not the only path to deep spiritual healing. So let's dive right in. How are you, Elvira?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
Doing amazing too. You look amazing too. Radiant and beautiful
Oh,
and gorgeous as ever.
thank you. So do you.
Oh,
Like
thank you.
always. You always do.
Thank you. What you see in me is I see in you, and what you see in yourself is what you see in me too. So that's an honor. Always an honor. So today's subject, again, the one thing that I just want to preface is that this episode is not necessarily about promoting the use of psychedelics. In fact, it's more about awareness. And the reason that we were really inclined to do this episode is because we recently did a podcast episode on spiritual awakening versus spiritual psychosis. And there were a lot of questions around, especially psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, because of the fact that it is a renaissance and so many people have access to that. Even when you think about like marijuana that has been legalized, throughout the United States of America. So today I want to share both perspectives because you yourself have not dabbled or worked with psychedelics at all, but I think that's beautiful because even though I have that experience, I think both of us together can come together and share this perspective of what it has looked like for you versus someone like myself, and also why we need to be very careful, very conscious, very aware, and truly not think that these avenues or paths are ways of escapism because it could really, really bite you in the butt, as we talked about in the spiritual psychosis episode. Have you seen like this renaissance yourself? Have you, knowing that you've never experienced them yourself, but have you been kind of aware of all of this thing coming to light with people just using plant medicine more and more?
Oh yeah, I've had friends who have done it. They've done either ayahuasca. No, I've had friends who do the cannabis and they've had experiences and with the mushrooms.
Hmm.
But I've been very surprised that I have this one friend who actually did the ayahuasca just randomly. I went to see her and she was like, "Guess what I did?" And I was like, "What?" And she did it here. I've been wanting to get more information in regards to if she researched, like 'cause somebody recommended it to her. But I mean, her experience was very, I mean, I don't know, because you've said this before. You need to do this with somebody that knows what they're doing. And I know when she did it, I think she went home after that. And they told her because her parents were visiting, I'm like, "You told your parents?" And she was like, "Yeah, I told them just in case anything happened to me, they knew what to do and take care of me." But she had a very beautiful experience where she connected with her past sister that had passed away and she healed that relationship with her and I believe with like aunts and stuff like that. So I've had good feedback from it, which is can be very interesting to me, but at the same time it kind of scares me to go there. But I've also had people tell me they're like, no, I have friends who have done it way too much. Like they feel they've done way too much mushrooms
Mhm.
and it's affected them negatively. So there has to be a balance, obviously, with like with everything.
Yeah. That's so interesting you say that with your friend, especially with ayahuasca. Like that's the thing. When I went to, some of you might know that I went to the jungle and to the Peruvian jungle in 2015, and I brought my husband and my two sons with me, and I did a lot of research before I went, like studied all the different centers out there. I would never have done ayahuasca here in the United States. And back then it wasn't as popular as it is now. There was a major increase now where you can find, even there's centers that are legalized here in Arizona now. There's one that people go to a lot. But what I'm noticing is that a lot of people also just have like these house ceremonies, where they I don't even know where they get the plant because how it grows in the jungle, right? And for me, it was very important to work with like shamans too, because they navigate the realm and they help you through that. And then what was also important is the fact that there was going to be integration, right? At least a little bit of support with that.
Yes.
But it scares me because I've heard the same thing you have heard, where I knew of a woman who went and then she drove home, and you don't drive home after something like this, even if it was a very small dosage. Like you just really need to be centered, and that scares me because people don't understand, like you said, what they're getting themselves into. They don't realize that these are plant medicines. You cannot control what happens. The plant medicine is going to show you. And then the other thing is, if the plant medicine was not crafted, or ayahuasca is an actual brew. I mean, psilocybin even itself, they grow it, the mushroom, right? But who was it grown by? The plant medicine ayahuasca, like, was there ritual? Was there ceremony? I mean, there's so many things because being the fact that I have gone to the jungle and done plant medicine, but I've also done mushrooms when I came back for more integration. And it was always very important for me to come from the source because I've heard people who that energy sticks to the plant medicine and then they feel it in their ceremony. So if that person, I don't know, was doing some really bad, dark shit, like that stuff sticks into the plant medicine and then you experience it in ceremony yourself. So it's interesting that you've also heard more and more people doing it. But I think one of the things that's so important is like to not see it as a joke. And like you said, like, I don't know if I want to go there. What makes you say that? Like, what's the biggest thing that would make you like stop yourself from actually doing something like that?
It does get my attention to want to do it because there's certain situations in my life that I feel I've been struggling a lot to overcome and get over it and just release and let go. And I don't know if I just need to, sometimes I just think I just need to give it time.
Hmm.
But sometimes I feel maybe it's so deeply rooted that I need some kind of help. But if I were to ever do anything, I would want to do it with a shaman, with some kind of guidance and ceremony, just because that's really where it originates from. Like, I don't want to go like down the street to some place and then they just give it to me and then they send me home and God forbid, like, I don't know what I'm taking. Like, I don't know. I mean, obviously you have to trust wherever you go, but I don't want to just, they send me home and then like I feel like you need some kind of guidance to guide you through whatever it is that you're experiencing because you don't know what's going to come up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You don't know what's going to come up if it's going to be a beautiful experience where my friend had that she reconnected with her sister and she had this very healing moment with her where they healed that relationship or traumas, really deep and rooted traumas that, like I said, like this association, there was something that happened in my childhood that I completely forgot and I didn't remember until my late teens. And I was like, wait a minute, this shouldn't have never happened. And how do you deal with that? You know what I mean? How do you process that when it all comes to you? Or what if multiple things come up? How do you process that without any guidance? That's where I think people need to be a little bit more cautious. Plus, we've had heard, especially here in Arizona, I think up in north in Sedona or something, didn't they have some kind of ceremony? They had something where like people died or
Yes, it was actually James, what was his name? He wasn't doing ayahuasca, he was doing one of those mes mezcals. Is that what you call them? No,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
temezcal.
Mezcal.
I'm confusing it. So it's like this cave, and then they put hot rocks in there. I experienced that in Palenque, in near Guatemala, the border of Guatemala and Mexico. But I experienced it with Mayan healers, at the top of a mountain where you go inside, and then there's like heat. So it feels like a sauna. But this guy was not trained. He was not like, he just was this American guy who wrote books on self-help, and he decided that he was going to play shaman. And it happened in Sedona, in that very sacred location. This location has gone through a lot, and a lot of people have said that it's like a place where Palladians actually come. And I think that he was abusing the land, he was abusing the practices. And it's not that it's like karma where he's being punished, but he was not being careful, because with these types of plant medicines, first of all, I think shamans are born. And if you are trained, because I know the shaman that I went to in Peru, he said he could train me, but it requires a lot. Like it requires dieta, which is changing your entire eating habits. And even for myself, like when I went, I not only did I research a lot, but I prepared right before. And I thought I was prepared afterwards, but I still had a very hard time, incredibly hard time coming back. I was like not wanting to be around people. I felt all my energy was stuck up here, which is what we were talking about with spiritual psychosis. So I was like paranoid. I could not, I didn't feel grounded. And that's when Kundalini Yoga came into my life to help me like bring that energy down. But if imagine if that happened to me, that I prepared, I researched, I did all this and that, and it still was very, very like shocking to the nervous system and to the brain. I can't imagine someone who just decides, hey, I'm gonna go do it. And
Yeah,
and even psilocybin, there's this woman, she's a indigenous healer from Oaxaca, Maria Sabina. Have you heard of her?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
So like,
The one with the mushrooms, no? Is it
yes,
mushrooms? Yes.
yes, that's her. So the one that says "Cúrate, mijita, con la luz del sol." So she was a healer that healed with mushrooms. Steve Jobs went to her. Like people would go to her. They all messed it up. They went up there. They took all the mushrooms dried up, and then she ended up like dying very, very poor. And I don't even think she was doing it intentionally. I just think that, people would come and come, and they made it into this big fad. And the whole thing is like the mushroom is not gonna like you, there's so much work afterwards, like there's so much integration that is needed, because like you said, you don't know what's gonna be revealed to you in your mind. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that we as a society we shouldn't mess this up again, because it happened in the 60s. There was a big renaissance of psychedelic. And I think that the government was involved with getting LSD, particularly to a lot of people, to make it like people were crazy with it so that they could then legalize it. But by the same token, like we need to be very responsible about these things, because again, you just don't know what you're gonna find in that subconscious mind.
Honestly, I think right now that you're speaking, I think if you haven't done no work whatsoever, and then you do that, that could re because even though you did your research, you went and you did it, and thank God you had shamans there guiding you. But I mean, to some extent, like it did affect you because you came back, you didn't want to talk to anybody. You didn't want to socialize with, you didn't want nothing to do with the world, you know? So I think I think it is probably responsible for us to like really start and integrate the work. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, I'm already on the diet.
Right?
I'm
What
like
is that
really
doing?
detoxing right now. But
Preparing you.
I've been preparing for this. No, just kidding.
I got you. I got you.
But you
Just
know what I
kidding.
mean? Like it just like I get it because
Right.
even with this extreme and I shouldn't even call it diet, it's just new way of life of just detoxing really from everything that we've been exposed to, and it's not even all food, it's even what we breathe in the air, right? But I think it should be very important for people to, like you said, not take it as a, oh, well, everybody's doing it, so let me do it too, which it seems like it has been like that recently, where I
Mhm.
see a lot of famous people, they're like, oh, yeah, I went and blah, blah, blah. But they don't seem like they're mentally ready. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think it has to be responsible. And like I said, my friend, she just went and they sent her home. And I'm like, how is that okay? Like, I don't, like, where was the guidance in this? Thank God she had a good experience, but what happens when you don't, you know?
Exactly.
And then
And
cannabis, like, God made these plants for a reason. They're giving a lot of medication that they make, it does come from a plant. Unfortunately, they probably add other stuff to it that's not good for us, that make us addicted or whatever. But like cannabis helps a lot of people with people like cancer patients. It helps them because when they're going through the chemo, the radiation, they're throwing up, they're they can't eat, they're not hungry, they lose their appetite. And then what happens is the cannabis actually helps them to take the nauseousness away, to give them back their appetite because they need to eat to keep their strength up. They can't keep going that way, you know?
yeah. Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I'm getting a surgery, nothing like life-threatening or anything like that, just a small thing that I got to take care of. And I was telling my doctor because my doctor was giving me the list of the prescriptions they're going to give me afterwards. And I was like, I don't do well with prescriptions and I especially will not take any painkillers. And she was like, I go, what about cannabis? I asked her, and she was like, just don't smoke it. Just take the edibles or take the CBD. And she literally, I mean, in the on the DL, she was like, "Yeah, just take that instead. Don't take, the Percocet and all that stuff." And I was like, "Thank God, like they're opening up their minds to more of this." Because for me, I feel like cannabis is absolutely that's another part of I feel like it is a psychedelic medicine and it can absolutely work that way. But like you said, it's very medicinal, and we have to take the stereotype away because for a long time I used cannabis and it was not something that prohibited me from doing my work, or in fact, it was very, very creative process. But I did deal with an attachment issue where I needed it every single day, and that's where, as much as when we practice yoga, it's not about us feeling or we're on the spiritual path. I don't, it's not that it makes you feel guilty for doing these things. It's just that you actually start to feel better in your body and you're like, do I even really need it? It's not guilt at all because God is not trying to make you feel guilty about using any substance. I feel like that's why the plants were born. I think about like how was ayahuasca even discovered? Like, can you imagine? Like,
Yeah.
how did they know? How did they, because they speak to the plants, the shamans, and they know every plant and everything. But I feel like God put it there for a reason. And I think that in the Bible, it's shown that psychedelics were there. I mean, I think it's Moses with isn't it the fire that he saw at the mountain, where that's like very reflective of him have taken psychedelics. So I think that
Mhm.
they've been around for a long time, and 1,000% our indigenous brothers and sisters have used them for a long time for spiritual expansion, healing. But the way they use them is so different than what we do here. I think people want to like fast fix, and it's not, it's not
No.
at all. I mean, I remember when I left the jungle, the shaman told me the work begins now. And I was like, what do you mean? I feel amazing, all love and light. Although I had 4 ceremonies of Mother Ayahuasca, and two of them were very blissful, but two of them were like, I thought I was gone. I thought
All four of them there in
all four of
Peru?
them
Oh,
at Peru. Yeah. It was 17 days that we went. So the first week we were doing San Pedro, which is a cactus. It's the masculine energy. That one made me very sick. It made me very like nauseated. I was very uncomfortable with that one. That one, it wasn't as much where we could actually walk. Like we were walking at the top of the Peruvian mountains with shamans too. We were in a very sacred home. The lady's an angel. She's like a real angel. Her dogs. That's what. After that, I got a Siberian Husky because she had Siberian Huskies, and the Siberian Huskies know, like if you're really, really struggling with the medicine, they come and they sit by you.
oh.
It's amazing. So that was a interesting experience. I felt like I was resisting a lot. So it wasn't.
But why do they tell you why you get sick? Like, do they tell you, like, because you're working on the masculine on the first week. So do they tell you it's because there's some issues there in regards to like your dad or your Because sometimes we could be more masculine than feminine, or we need to find that balance. Is it because of that, or what?
Yes, exactly. You're dead on. So it was, and at that point, I had just started my healing journey in 2015. So talk about toxic masculinity on steroids. So that's why, yeah, the plant and I were like not doing well. And I took my sons with me. They were my son was 17, I think, and the other one was only 11 or 12. He did not drink, but he was there. And it was funny because last week he was like, Mom, I'm so glad that I started my healing journey early. And I was like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Because now he's like locked in, tapped in, like he's like connected to God, walks around with his Bible and all this. So it's the cutest thing in the world. And my oldest too. He's actually the one that got us introduced me. So he was 16 years old and his teacher wanted him to write a paper. They were working on mental health and therapy. So my son, he's like an old soul. My son is like my teacher. I'm not kidding you. He's like a wise,
Yeah.
wise soul. And he did a whole paper on psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. He got like an A plus. His teacher loved it. And I was like, what did you write on? And then I studied what he wrote on. And then I told God, if this is something that I need to do, because I had been searching for a long time, make the money available, make the time available. And I'm not kidding you, within probably a month, everything came
Uh,
together. And here we are on our way to Peru. And so then, hi Zuko, how are you, my friend? We're not talking right now. We're not playing, okay? So then, so then what happened after that was, so I was like looking at his paper, everything that he wrote, and one of the things that really caught my attention was the science behind it. So he did this whole thing about what happens to like the brain, what happens to your body during it. And that's the thing that really like, I was like, maybe this is what I've been seeking because one of the things that happens in the brain when someone takes psychedelics, and it could be mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, MDMA, is that it interacts with the serotonin receptors in the brain. And what it does is that it leads to increased connectivity between the brain regions. So it's almost like meditation, neuroplasticity, right? There's this video that's really neat where they're scanning the brains of meditators, and you can see like the electricity being creating of new neurons that start to talk to each other again, which we've talked about, with generational trauma, they stop communicating and then our brain, doesn't function the way it should function, right? That's the cool thing about psychedelics, that one of the biggest effects is that it starts to create the neuroplasticity, but also this part of the brain that is known as the DMN. It's the default mode network. It basically, this is essentially the part of the brain that's associated with our sense of self, our ego, and our conditioned thought patterns. And that part of the brain is what becomes affected so that it falls. But you have to think about it. That same thing happens with spiritual awakening, with
yeah.
with Kundalini Yoga meditation. So that's why it feels like we were talking about with our spiritual psychosis versus spiritual awakening. It feels like an ego death. It feels like you're going bananas. It feels like you're going crazy. People are afraid to use psychedelics because they think they see hallucinations. It's not hallucinations. You're seeing the truth. You are, think of it as like there's no veil between the physical and the spiritual. So my experience was like I told you, I thought in one of the ceremonies, I thought I died. I really did think I was gone. It was very
Your ego was dying.
exactly. And that's because this part of the brain, which is why there's this gentleman, his name is Rick Doblin, and he's been working with the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. So he's been trying to get psychedelics approved by the FDA since the 80s. Can you believe that? Since the 80s. And he hasn't given up. And this last year, they rejected him again. It was already at the fourth level of approval, but actually, blessing in disguise because
Yes.
now he doesn't have to go through the government and through all of that. Now he has enough funding because a lot of people believe in this. In fact, Silicon Valley, I'm afraid of what Silicon Valley will do with plant medicine because you know how they are. They get
Yeah.
invested, just like marijuana,
Yeah.
cannabis. You got like government involved, and then the marijuana is like horrible levels of THC. And you look at these young kids, marijuana, the plant versus like the vaping that they do with it. And then you got brains that are still developing until the age of what, 25, they say. And then you give them this like, what is it? Like 50, 60% high levels of THC. No one, they're having psychosis, the young
Yeah.
kids. And it's more common than we think now in the high schools, especially with the vaping, because it doesn't smell and they can kind of get away with it. So it is very, very important that we understand that, yes, it can bring healing to the brain, but when used for that purpose, not for escaping, because you can't escape at all.
Now that you say that, now I see what is happening to somebody that I know, this young man, because he's very obsessed with it, but it's to the point now where we feel something's going on and he's just using it to escape, but it's not healing. He's not doing any kind of work, he's not doing any kind of healing. He's very young. So it's affecting him negatively because I was speaking to the mom and she's telling me he wasn't like this as a kid. Like he had a good heart. He has a good, like, I don't understand what is happening here, you know? Like he's just, but that's what it is. He's obsessed with it, but he's not doing the work.
There you go.
He's doing the cannabis, but he's not doing the work. He's not doing anything. He's just trying to, I'm assuming, escape
Um,
from whatever happened to him as a child, but he's not dealing with it, so it's affecting him negatively, where to the point where I was even discussing with the mom, like maybe he's schizophrenic, like what is happening? Like we don't understand like how to even help him at this point. We're trying to figure out how to get to him to get him to help him.
mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense.
the integration part. And it's very serious for men in particular because cannabis increases your estrogen levels, which is making them less masculine too. I think that's done on purpose. The other thing about that and the lack of integration is the fact that it's like a bypass, like you're saying. It's like ignoring. There's a guy, and again, I'm going to share some really good statistics too. So this is not to scare everyone, but there's a gentleman whose name is Terrence McKenna. And have you ever heard of him?
No, I don't think I have.
He was in the 90s. He was big in the 90s. I actually took the maybe early 2000s, but he was big about psychedelic and particular mushrooms. So he would always talk about mushrooms, but he would always talk about like the visuals and the sacred geometry, never about what the mushroom was teaching him. And he did big events. People would come, and it's not like he was a wild guy. He was actually pretty educated, but then why does he end up getting a tumor in his brain of a mushroom? And that wasn't the plant punishing him. That was him punishing himself because he kept bypassing. The mushroom was trying to tell him a lot of stuff about his parents and the stuff that he grew up with and all of that. And even through the plant medicine use, he could not. He could not accept it. So it was always just like chasing the visuals. And it's very dangerous. And I feel like in California, a lot of people are growing mushrooms, a lot. And maybe it's because of the people that because I connected with a few people from California. It's like very common. People that I didn't even think would be doing mushrooms. And also, that's where I noticed there's a lot more ceremonies happening of ayahuasca in the freaking middle of LA, and or you go to this place and that place. And it's just like you got to know what you're getting yourself into because
Yes.
we're not trying to scare you. I feel that psychedelics absolutely were instrumental in my journey, in my healing journey. I would not regret. And would I use them again? Yes, I would. Not to, here's what happened with me. I didn't go chasing ayahuasca. She became available for me. And even now, I don't go chasing it. She's only become available to me one other time when I went to Costa Rica. And even when I was there, they're like, I didn't want a lot. I just wanted a little drop because just even being around her was enough for me. And why? Because I'm still freaking integrating all the stuff that
Mm.
went out there. So if I were to do it again now, or if I were to use mushrooms again, it would be very small dosages where I could literally like be with myself for like a week to really, and that's because I already have experience with it. But if you don't have any experience and you go and you just think, oh, nothing's gonna happen or whatever, that could be like a really bad trip that could leave you in a state of psychosis.
Well, it's like the dark nights of the soul when you feel like you're going crazy. It's a spiritual psychosis. I'm I was meditating like 17 different kriyas because one was to heal the relationship with your mom, and the other one's to heal the relationship with your dad, and the other one's to heal for self-love, and the other one's for I don't know what, and the other one, like I don't even remember, and your inner child. And I was doing like, because I was, like I've said before, I felt I was suffocating. I was, my soul was dying, and then the last couple of episodes, I realized I was dying to be me, you
Mm.
know? So I was doing all these different meditations that I felt it just pushed me over to like, okay, God's like, you want to heal, here you go. And and everything's, all this awareness is coming at me all at once. Yeah. So if you start doing this because everybody's doing it and you want to heal, I understand you want to heal. I've been there. I think we all, we feel this urge of, I can't do this anymore. Because deep down, I think we all know we keep repeating these same patterns over and over in generation after generation. I've had so many women tell me, I didn't even realize I was repeating the same pattern that my mom was in of abusive relationship or of, abandonment or of this and that until you become aware of it. But if you're just going because you feel it inside, I think when you finally like you've had enough, you hit a generation with the generations like, I can't do this anymore. I'm suffocating, I'm dying. And then you start looking for it, but you're just constantly doing these psychedelics or the ayahuasca, whatever, because you want to heal, but you're not doing anything else. You're not getting a coach, a spiritual coach, or you're not really learning, listen, because I listen to a lot of audio stuff, which is very like David Guillaume. Like I love Kabbalah. Like I don't even, that's not my religion, but I love listening to him. Nothing of what he's saying sounds like, wow, this is evil. This is, you know what I mean? Everything's what he's saying. It sounds to me like, wow, like, yeah, like why wouldn't God want that for me or for all of us? So that's complete. I think that's so dangerous when people they're just doing it because they want to heal, but they're not doing anything else or they have no other guidance. Like that's very dangerous. And now that we're talking about this, I do see it with this
Mhm.
young man. It,
Well, and then they give it the whole medicine a bad rap,
yeah.
Then we have a bad reputation because yeah, it's like so when people take mushrooms and then if they don't integrate, they act wild. They really do. It's what happened in the 60s and the 70s. Timothy McLeary, who was also a big proponent for psychedelics back then, he was using them for partying, LSD. Now they're saying that he was actually put there by the CIA on purpose to make it seem bad. But then the government has used LSD too for MK Ultra, where they basically get people down to like the core of their nothing in their nervous system and brain, and then they hypnotize them. And then you see all these crazy things that these people end up doing. So they can be used for bad in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. A
Well,
lot.
didn't in Vietnam War, didn't they give
Yes.
what was it? And they brought wasn't
Heroin. I think they give them heroin.
heroin.
Yes,
They
heroin.
even that's when they brought the Asians over
Yes.
to Sinaloa, Mexico,
Mhm.
and they cultivated it because it was a perfect land, and then they would ship it over there so they could continue with the war. And no, I've heard way too many stories where, well, yeah, I believe it.
1,000%. That's wild to me. I can't believe that's even real. But
Yeah.
yeah, what is happening here is that yeah, we do have a lot of people that have these huge realizations, but then they struggle to function in day-to-day life. Why? Because it's not just about receiving the insights, even in our meditation practice. It's about integrating them into our nervous systems. And this is where Kundalini Yoga came into my life and is as a big flex because trauma is released through psychedelics, but also through the Kundalini yoga work, like you were saying. That's where your spiritual awakening started, and it felt like a psychosis, right? Because you were integrating all of these different spiritual practices. So the DMN started to collapse of the brain. Even though the neural plasticity was working, it's still very uncomfortable because, like you described in the last episode, which if any of you missed it, go check out the spiritual psychosis versus spiritual awakening. Recently, somebody just left a comment on that podcast episode. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for now I understand. If we can understand it as like a scientific way, the DMN part of your network has collapsed, you're not going crazy, then we would make integration more important. And now that is something that Rick Doblin has worked with, the founder of MAPS. That was one of the things. It wasn't just that he was studying the plant medicine, he was also working with what happens when we give them therapy and 8 weeks versus 10 weeks, and what does the therapy have to look like? Even Dr. Gabor Mate, which is our favorite trauma-informed doctor, he ended up going to the Amazon jungle and he did ayahuasca. And think about it, he's a therapist who has worked with people at their lowest and lows. He was working with the um, community in Canada, Indigenous, high levels of addiction. What does that mean? High levels of abuse, right? So imagine all of his life, that's all he did. All he did. When he went to the jungle, the shamans had to take him out of the room where everybody was at because he was covered in so much energetic darkness from all these people that he had taken on their energy that the shamans had to put him in a private room. They had to chant to him for days. And he wasn't
Wow.
even allowed to go back to the main room until they worked with him. Then he came back and he started working with the Kundalini Yoga therapist, which is just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it made sense in my life what was happening. And now together, they've been helping with the integration. And I hope that they continue to do things like that. But that's the whole thing. Like you're left in a psychic shock. You're left in a like, how do I even put the puzzle pieces together, whether it is ayahuasca or whether it is psilocybin? Because mushrooms for me, I have the utmost respect because to be honest with you, the 3 or 4 times that I've done it, only one time has it been even close to bliss. Everything else has been in your face the shadow. What the hell is really at the root? It very, very uncomfortable. And I prepared for those things too. Took care of my diet, did not eat for the day, fasted. I afterwards, I remember even getting like IV therapy. Like I just needed to really make sure that I could ground. And again, and I didn't even take a lot. So I can only imagine the people that like Terrence McKenna take a bunch, take as much as possible. It will never kill you. You will never overdose, but it will leave you crazy if you do not understand what's happening inside of you.
Oh yeah, I bet. I mean, it just even the dark nights of the soul, you have to sit down and process what is happening. The reality of what you thought was is falling apart because we only know what we know.
Mhm.
So if we were being raised a certain way, and we have these parents, and they're teaching us this, and they're doing the best they can. I'm not here to judge and criticize my parents. I'm just saying like they did the best they could with what they knew, and it's and a lot of times that is not the best. So when the truth start when what you thought was starts falling apart and you start seeing everything clearly, it could be very shocking. And like I've said before, you have to look at yourself as well. How am I showing up in life? What am I contributing to the problems in my marriage or the problems with my sister or the problems with my kids? And then you're just trying to heal and you're just constantly doing this. My goodness. My God, how are you not going to go crazy?
Yes. And that
That's
was the
scary.
And that's what when Jogi Bhajan came from India to the east, I mean west, in the 60s, that's what he saw. He saw people just on cars, on floors. He saw a bunch of just hippies.
Yep.
Even the hippie movement, they said, was created by the CIA. There's a lot of evidence of that. Why is it that even there's a guy recently who was on the Joe Rogan podcast who was talking about how even the Doors, like Jim Morrison, all of these people that were huge during the psychedelic renaissance, they all come from military families. Isn't that
Mm-hmm.
weird? Like now I see the Doors completely different. And that guy was destructive. Now I used to like him in high school a lot and I watched the documentary and then we watched the documentary I think like a year ago, my husband and I were like, this guy was horrible. Like, what the hell? Why would I listen to his music? Like, what in the world? I swear, to me, it felt like he was possessed by something. And now, go ahead.
No, I grew up listening to him because my dad would listen to him. So I do like his music, but I did see his movie and I was like, whoa, like he was, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, he's crazy. And I saw well, it kind of has to do with this. There's an imitator of him. He's called Wild Child, and he played at the Roxy in Hollywood. And I remember in my 20s, early 20s, I went to go see it. And I remember there was a balcony, and he like it's like I went back in time and I was actually watching him. It was an out of body experience, and I was completely sober. I wasn't drinking. I was nothing. And I'm watching him and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm back, like I'm actually watching him perform. Like it was, and it's a small little club, and I could see everybody. I was in the like a balcony level, and I could see everybody down me, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people on shit right now. Like everybody was crazy. And my friend was telling me, like, yeah, he's on mushrooms, he's just drunk, he's on this, he's on that. And I'm like, how do you know? Just by the way they're acting. And I was like, wow. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a lot of people high on something. Like this is kind of scary. And I remember thinking, if anything goes down, where am I gonna go? And I remember looking around and I looked to the back of me and there was like a bench all across the wall. And there were these older couples that I feel like they were at my parents' age at that time. And they were all just sitting there. And I think they grew up listening to the Doors like my parents, and they wanted to see this guy because it's like you're looking at him, like literally. But they were kind of scared and just sitting there like, whoa, like all these kids are on something. This is scary. They weren't even, it didn't seem like they were enjoying the show because they were so worried about everything that was going around them, but they wanted to see the show. And
Yeah.
I wanted to go up to them and be like, I'm sober, okay? I'm not everybody's on high on something. Like I really wanted
Yeah.
to talk to them. But like, yeah, I do believe that. I do believe because my husband's very into like we have this whole thing right now with Mexico and the United States and the drug use and this and that and the abuse. But it's like it's true. Like once it crosses the border, who distributes it? Like it's money. Who says the government's not involved or politicians or whoever, like big people, are not making money one way or the other? How is it that all these arms, they say, oh, well, Mexico, the cartel has all these guns and this and that. How do we know they're proving that it's coming from the United States? How is it getting over there? Like there has to be something. Like people say, oh, I don't know. I do believe that though, that there's a bigger force because it's money.
There you
At the
go.
end of the day, it's money.
Right. And that's why it's even more dangerous now because
Yes.
of that. It wasn't like that 10 years ago. Even I'll tell you this, I don't think I've ever told you this, but in high school, my friend comes up to me. I think I had turned 15. I was going through a really rebellious age in my life because my mom would not let me go out anywhere. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I want. I don't give a damn. And my friend comes up to me, and my mom did not like this friend at all. She was like, and it's crazy because my friend, I hated my parents when I was 15, right? So like
We
my
all
friend
do.
was like, I wish, I know, right? No, she would say, I wish I had parents like yours because her parents didn't pay attention to her.
Mm.
So she was always allowed to just do whatever she wanted. And she comes up to me one day and she's like, do you want to do LSD for your birthday? I didn't even know what LSD was, but you know me, rebellious. Yes. So that was my first experience with psychedelics. And it was wild. Like I did it in my parents' house and I had to hide from them. I thought I was melting. I was insane. But I realize now that I feel like that experience propelled me to be who I am today. I feel a lot of people say that even people that are like neurodivergent or that have like these because I don't like to identify myself, right? But if they have psychic powers, they're very empathic, they're very intuitive, that psychedelics actually help them because it helps them. It sounds opposite, it sounds like an opposition, but it actually helps you ground. And I feel like that's who I've always been. Like I've always, it was almost like when I took the LSD, it confirmed that spiritual realm existed, and it actually made me feel less crazy. And then after that, I got pregnant, and like a year after that, and life just took its own path. But what I did realize after coming back from the jungle and seeing my history with psychedelics is that Kundalini Yoga absolutely can get you the same effect. I understand why Chogi Bhajan came and he was like, you don't need to be doing that. He was basically saying, like, I can get you high off of your own supply. And that was the
Yes.
whole thing, working with the brain, working with, but by the same token, like you just described, it's still gonna bring up trauma that we haven't necessarily processed. So it feels like a psychedelic experience. My sister is very like tapped in. She's like very like connected to her gifts and she can, her dreams and the visuals and all that. And when she practices Kundalini, she's like, she tells me what she's feeling and she's like, she resisted it for a long time. Why? Because I feel like she already has all these plasma energy in her. So 3 minutes, she's like, is this what you feel in a psychedelic? And I'm like, that's exactly it. So she's already experiencing it
Yeah.
through her own practice and meditation, which is why she was afraid, but now she's learning how to channel that energy so that, because one of the biggest fears about this, and think about what we were talking about with spiritual psychosis and awakening, is that you don't know what reality is. You don't,
Yes.
you're very afraid of losing yourself in the spiritual realm. And I get it. I didn't go through that extreme, but I've heard stories, of how crazy it can get. So I understand her and I'm glad that we never pushed. She slowly has been integrating the Kundalini yoga. Now she's being very consistent and it has transformed her life. Now she's like, I now was but divine timing. You can't
Yeah.
push this. Not everyone's like you and I, where we're like 15 meditations. Let's get this thing done this week. I got stuff to do next week. So vámonos. And I'm glad that it wasn't as I mean, it could have been so much more shocking for you. But by the same token, don't you feel like you were kind of being guided and kind of like I don't think God would have let you gone any further. Or what do you think?
I think I think God works perfectly, and that's one of the things that I've learned in the Course in Miracles. God works perfectly and he has a plan and he knows what we need at the moment that he gives it to us, even though at that moment maybe we think we're not ready. But I think he does know you are ready. And if I did those 15, 17 meditations all at once, because like I've said, I felt I was dying, I was suffocating, and I was starving, I was hungry. I needed something and I just needed to do it. I didn't realize it was gonna throw me into this dark nights of the soul. But like I've said before, deep down inside, I've always known what it was. I always knew who my parents were. I always knew, but I just, even myself, I knew how I was showing up in life, but at the same time, I didn't want to, it's hard to accept it, especially the bad things that, like I used to blame my husband for everything. No, I had to take responsibility and look in the mirror and be like, no, you are also causing problems in the marriage. Accept it and acknowledge it. Take responsibility for yourself. And sometimes it's very hard to actually accept it, what it really is. But I mean, like I said, I think it's perfect. I think when we're ready, we'll be able to do it. And your sister, thank God, she knows to follow her instinct, to be like,
Exactly.
no, I need to take my time. And I think God has been preparing her like you have. And then now she started teaching A Course in Miracles herself, which is, I think it's preparing her even more to kind of stabilize what the gift she already had since she was a little girl.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because she still needed to integrate that, I believe. She still needed to work on that and really accept it and kind of learn how to manage it. And then she was able to integrate the Kundalini.
You nailed it 1,000%. And of course, the miracles to me is like a psychedelic too, because it's a spiritual practice. That's the whole thing. There's this researcher, Dr. Rick Strassman. He studied DMT in the 1990s, and he basically proved that DMT is naturally present in the brain. And scientists believe it plays a huge role in the near-death experience too, which is why you feel like you're dying, like literally. And when people have had near-death experiences and they've come back, they say, "Oh, it looks so beautiful," and it's actually a really beautiful experience. There's nothing for us to be afraid of, to be honest with you. And I was always afraid of that, but it's still, while you're going through it, it's like, what the hell? Where am I? And I was really worried about my kids because. And my husband, I was like, what did I do? Because you don't have control over your body in ayahuasca. In mushrooms, it depends on how much you take. I've never taken enough to not have control over my body. Believe me, and even as much as I've taken, it's been in more than enough. But with ayahuasca, that's you don't have control over your body. People throw up. I threw up a lot. People use the restroom. I didn't, nothing like that happened to me, but I saw grown men literally on the floor crying and not doing the medicine the second time because it was that strong and invasive. But that's the whole thing. That DMT is always present. And I thought maybe that's what it is. I mean, maybe she's just born, those that have those psychic gifts are born with this DMT secretion happening more. I mean, think of it as children. That's a natural state. DMT is constantly secreting. That's why we don't know. That's why children see the spirit world. That's why
Yeah.
children have imaginary friends. They're not imaginary, they're actually there. It's because they're constantly secreting that DMT. And think about it, doesn't it make sense? Because the work, the spiritual practice and the psychedelics, they dissolve the DMN network where the ego is. So if you're a child, you don't have an ego. So if you
No.
don't have an ego, that's why you can see in the spiritual realm. And if any of your children have these gifts, please do not make them feel crazy, ladies. Please do not make them feel like they're weird because of a witch's wound that you're going through. Because absolutely, not only do all of us have psychic powers, my son was just telling me that in Silicon Valley, they're trying to hire a lot of people that have telepathy because they want to use them to build these new AI infrastructures. So we're going to become very quickly very popular and it's going to be very normal because guess what? All of us can do it. It's not just a select few. Some of us were born, I think, with more access to it, but we can all do it. And think about it, we all have access to these practices now. Kundalini yoga, you couldn't practice it unless you were some kind of king or guru until the 60s when Yogi Bhajan came. So when he came, he's like, look, let me show you pranayama. Let me show you some breathing techniques. Things like breath of fire. You know breath of fire, right? That
Yes.
is an intense breath where it's oxygenating the brain, but it's also stimulating the pineal gland. What did our brother Jesus Christ said? You want to enter into the kingdom of heaven from within you? It's the pineal gland. There's a lot of references to the pineal gland in the Bible where it is our birthright to awaken this energy, bring it to the pineal gland so that we can accept the atonement, basically go beyond this belief that we're just the body. And that's the same thing with mantra and sound. You know, when we're chanting specific vibrations, you're stimulating the hypothalamus and the entire endocrine system. I feel like with Longe con Cars, it's very easy. That's a chant that we chant inside of the academy for any of you that might not know what it is. That is like the most mystical chant that I've ever chanted in my life. Like when I truly sit and chant in the present moment with that, I everything dissolves. There is no physical body. And it's not that I'm chasing that experience because I'm not. Most of my meditation practice is not all love and light and a mystical experience. It's like dealing with the emotions, processing emotions, releasing cortisol and stress from the body, right? But there are glimpses where just through chanting Long Con Cars, it's like everything around me dissolves. And why is that? Well, scientifically, I got some more DMT that's coming from the brain. So we don't have to be afraid of these things. More importantly, we just have to understand that they're there to assist us if we use them responsibly. Don't you think?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And everybody's that in our group, in our women's group that have done the Kundalini yoga, I think we've all experienced something that we can't even explain, like some kind of release, some kind of just I can't even explain it. Sometimes it's just emotion. Just you just feel happy. I've had people tell me I couldn't stop laughing. And she's a jokester and I feel that's her release. That's how she releases. And some of us are crying or some of us are we just feel it like something was lifted away from me. Sometimes we don't even know what.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing that we're saying, even with the practice of using psychedelics for generational healing or Kundalini yoga. I would say that for some people, psychedelics can offer definitely a glimpse to what's possible and absolutely Kundalini yoga. But the real question is, can you sustain the awareness? That's the real question. Because, yes, some need external tools to open the door to consciousness or awareness, but others cultivate this awareness through a dedicated practice. I remember in my ceremony, literally that happened. Like there was like the plant medicine was like in this flower formation, and she gave me the key. but she didn't open the door. It was so interesting. She showed me the door and she gave me the key, but she's like, you have to open it. You have to get up and open it. And can I tell you that it wasn't until probably a year ago that I understood what that meant through my practice? I saw the door again. We were doing, I don't know if it was one of our 40 days. It was a meditation that we were all doing together. And I saw the door. I know what it was. I was in my Kundalini Yoga therapist training, and I was taking a course on the journey of the soul. And my teacher, I'm telling you, it wasn't even what I learned in that class. She's a healer. And she took us through like this meditation. And it was like I was back there drinking Mother Ayahuasca. And then I saw the door again. And then this time I opened it and I walked in. And the trippiest thing was that on the other side was a vast, infinite universe. That's all that it was. And it was just like you were walking in, infinite potential. Nothing set in stone. You're creating your reality through connection through your soul. Welcome home. That was like the message. And I was not under any substances during that time. It was just through that. So again, even that can be very scary for someone because they might not understand the door. They might not understand, especially I feel like if you're especially very religious, it can be very shocking because then what I've seen with women who have been very religious and they start to gain this inner power, it's like they become really, really afraid
Oh
because
yeah.
they're like, is this from the devil? Who is really talking to me? One of the things that I've done a lot now lately is I ask God in my meditations, reveal yourself to me, God. Reveal yourself to me, God. And I'm more consistent about it. I was doing this like a year ago, stopped. And now that I'm more consistent about it, I feel God is shouting all the time. I feel like God is like everywhere. And every time I have like a little bit of doubt about something, it's like all of a sudden the sign is there almost immediately. And it just makes me come into more conviction with how these practices prove that God is real, but also how important to know that God is in your life. I heard this amazing story of a guy today. He was addicted, highly addicted to alcohol. And he was even homeless at that point. And then he fell to the floor. He said, God, if you are real, then help me because I can't stop drinking alcohol.
Mm.
And within that moment, he said that within 20 minutes, a guy came into his life. And he's really famous now. I think he's from Australia because he has like a really interesting accent. And he said that there was a guy that came into his life, and the guy said, "You know what? I'm gonna help you. Come to my house, and you can stay in my house." And he was like, "Oh, there's God, right?" The guy took him to, I think it was like one of those, I don't know if it was Alcoholic Anonymous, but one of those meetings, to help him and all that. And he spent time with the guy for like, I think he said like 2 weeks. And then finally he was able to fly, right? To get himself back onto his feet. And he ended up moving out. And then one day he goes back to go find this guy, right? And he keeps knocking on the apartment door and the no one opens. And he goes to the neighbor and he's like, "Where's Angel?" I don't know if it was his name was something, I don't remember what it was. And the guy was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "The guy that lived right here." And he's like, "No one has lived there for more than 5 years." And he's
Wow.
like, "What?" So then he goes to the meeting where he was going to meet. He's like, "Where's John? I was talking to him, right?" He's like, "You were talking to yourself. This was an
Oh wow.
angel, an angel. This was God." Like
I just got chills.
I started crying when I heard that story. That is how relevant God is in our life. And God made these plant medicines. God made Kundalini Yoga. I mean, God even is part of creating the demons and all of that. There's so many paths to take to experience God. And there's no bad or good, there's no right or wrong. Wherever God calls you, trust. I think the most important thing, and that's what happened with me when I told God, if you want me to go to the if this is right for me for the Amazon jungle, then you're gonna make it happen because 17 days was a long time. It was not cheap. It was very expensive. It wasn't just me, it was all four of us. Do I regret it? Never. I will never. But God made that a possibility because I talked to God about it first. So I don't think we have to be so quick to jump. I think it's so important to like have a conversation with God, and God will show you, hey, is the practice for you, right? Is the psychedelic plant for you? And you got to really trust your intuition. Sadly, these there's so much predators that go towards people that have trauma. You would think that didn't happen, but it happens more because you become very vulnerable. You become, very, very gullible, especially when you're seeking help. And then sometimes you become even trauma bonded with these people where, like, now I worship them, now. Oh, I gotta keep going to the ceremonies like you were talking about. In the end, from what I've read in the Bible, Jesus was like, you don't even need ritual. You don't need anything. Like, you just have to go within, accept the kingdom of heaven from within, and that's it. And God is with you.
I like that right now you were saying when you went to Peru to the Amazon jungle, there were men that did the ayahuasca and they were just crying and they didn't even continue because it was so much for them. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle what they were facing because they probably hadn't done absolutely no work. You were more stronger because we're more like, I'm here, I'm doing it. Like we're more like, I'm getting this done right now, you know? But
Okay.
there's some people that haven't done absolutely no work and they go into this and it's too much for them. I think it's just there has to be some kind of process gradually go into it. It does worry me that it's become so popular that people are just doing it left or right. And like you said, there's a lot of predators in everything, in
Mhm.
every industry, unfortunately, even real estate. There's just too many people taking advantage of vulnerable people because all they care about is the money or, so people please do your research, do what you need to do. And there's a process. And if you don't want to do that, that's completely fine. And, unfortunately, religion has always been very like, you shouldn't be doing yoga. And I'm like, my experience has not been negative at all. And when I say that God speaks to me, it's like, I'll give you an example. When I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, and I remember I had like some kind of little party and it was just the girls, like some kind of like, I don't know if it was Princess House, something like that, where we had like, just women that came over to the house, like my mom's girlfriends and this and that, family friends. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking of going back to work. My daughters were little. And I didn't say anything to my husband. I didn't say anything to my mom. I hadn't said nothing to absolutely nobody. Just I was stressed out about money. I started researching how much am I going to pay for daycare, how much I'm going to pay for gas, how much was I earning right before I left work. And then I have this, we go to this little party, and then one of the ladies, a family friend of ours, just randomly comes up to me because I asked God. I said, God, what do I do? What do I do? I had been praying to him. What do I do? You tell me what to do. She just randomly comes up to me and she's like, Mamita, don't even think about going back to work. You need to stay home and you need to take care of your babies because nobody's going to take care of them like you do. Please don't even think about going back to work. How do I explain that?
Exactly.
How can that not be God? If I'm praying to him and I'm asking him, what do you want me to do? And then he just randomly comes up to me and says that to me. How can you deny that? You can't, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I know some people don't believe because of whatever experiences they've had in life. I get it. But my experience is like, yeah, there was a time where I was very upset at him. I was very angry. He gave me my space, but he showed me right there and then, don't ever doubt me again. I'm right here and I've been with you always. So people, please ask for guidance, ask for help because he is here with us.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing that I think with psychedelics, I don't even know, you kind of have to have it, like you said, with that guy, he struggled so much. And not only did he not do any work prior, but he probably had like zero connection with the divine and God. Because we would have, after we would have ceremony, we would have a break in the day, next day, and we would all talk about the stuff that we went through. And there was some deep stuff in that room. Like, I thought I had gone through a lot of shit, and like
Yeah.
these people have gone through a lot, And I think that my relationship with God has always been strong, like even as a little girl, I would talk to God. But the problem is that we live in a society that worships the God of darkness, Satan, literally. Like this is something that like how many people have been killed in the name of God, And these prophecies that we're seeing right now, like they invented that shit. They perceive them in a way that makes it comfortable for them to go take out other people. And that's not what Jesus was teaching
Yeah.
at all. And the whole thing about Jesus Christ is that he was not passive. He was a rebel. He was a radical. He stood up to them. I found a couple of sections in the Bible, Matthew, I think it's 21:12, where he calls them hypocrites, the Pharisees. He said, "You are hypocrites." And then there's another part of the Bible where there's in the temple where you're supposed to go pray, right? And all this, they're exchanging money, the priest or whoever's in there, right? The rabbi, and they're doing all this. So he goes in there and he takes the table and he throws it over and he's like, "You money makers." That's why they got rid of him because he was not passive. He
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
action. He used his sword and he was teaching that there was no one in the middle of you and God, not the priest, not the church, not the guru. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of great churches that I'm sure that interpret his teachings in a very beautiful way, but religion was not created by our brother Jesus Christ. It was created by the Roman Empire. It's like they collapsed and then they rebranded themselves. Oh, now we're the Catholic Church, And we have to be, I'm not saying we have to be angry at religion because I think for a while I was because I was like, this is ridiculous. Like they lied to me. It's more because we don't want to stereotype and put all of them in one box.
No.
But what I would say is one of the biggest gifts that I've received as part of my healing journey is knowing who God truly is, a loving God, not a judgmental God. Not only that, but with that, and it was a lot of that, is A Course in Miracles has taught us so much about who we are at our core and what Jesus was really here to teach. But then a big part of that also takes me to this ability to then talk to God, to ask God to make that has been our theme in our community all month of March. It's like everything. He's my CFO. He's my CEO. Do I need a parking space? I'm going to talk to God. Do I need the right surgeon? I'm going to talk to God. And I think for a while I was just like, that's lazy. It's not productive. God doesn't want to be involved in all this BS. God wants to be involved in all aspects of your life. And that's the whole thing that I feel that with psychedelics and even with Kundalini yoga, it's very confrontational to know that. Like, we don't want to accept that. We're like, no, I rather continue to believe that God is a judgmental God and that I'm a sinner and I'm guilty because then that gives me the excuse to not step into my true power. I think we're through the mental health stuff that we've been seeing, everyone's talking about mental health right now, but I feel like it's creating a lot of victimhood. A lot of victimhood where people are, like you said, they're not taking accountability. They're like, oh, she's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. I don't know if people knew, but narcissism is actually a mental health diagnosis. So if we're calling someone a narcissist, what are we then? Because that's a mental health. It's like the community is like boundaries, right? Like we've talked about this. Boundaries is like more important than you figuring out what's also going on in here. So we create this society of victimhood because we have this false perception of God, and then we do the psychedelic medicine or the Kundalini yoga, and we reject it because in Kundalini yoga and in psychedelic medicine, you're shown the true God, the God of love, the God of expansion, the God of light. And not a lot of people are actually ready to see that. And I get it. It's a program. It took me a long time to reprogram that part. I've been studying the Course of Miracles since 2008. I don't think it really hit me until 2020, where I was able to do that. And I did a video recently on TikTok, and people were like, of all ages, they're like, this is the truth. God is in me. And now I can say this out loud because before I would probably be crucified for saying something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think a big part of this is our relationship with God, and it's what prohibits us from getting into the work. But if you can sustain what happens with the ego and move forward with courage and with faith, you get to this point where you really do come into union with the true God, I believe, of love and forgiveness.
Yeah, like why would we think he's anything else? Why would we think it's so unfortunate when people say, I'm doing this in the name of God, but then they're hurting other people, they're murdering other people, or that doesn't make sense to me. Like, what do you mean? That doesn't, you know? And I think he does want us to integrate them in everything we do in life. Like even when I did the 9-day detox and I continued this new way of life where I'm this new way of eating, everything ever since then, I'm like, God, I'm dedicating this to you. This last week I've been craving, like I don't know, just something else. And then I'm just like, no, God, I've dedicated this to you. You keep me strong. Like you put this in my heart and I need for you to keep me strong because, like, and then sometimes my husband's, he's just like, well, just eat. And I'm like, no, then all of this is going to go to waste. All of this work that I've done? No, no, I've made it this far, which I didn't even think I would make it this far. Like, why would I not be able to continue it? Like, no. But I think God does want us to reach out to him and to rely on him because that's what he wants. It's like he's our father. Why wouldn't he want us to rely on him, to reach out to him? And how can he not be a part? How can we not be him be in us and us be a part of him if we're his children? That doesn't make sense, you know?
Exactly. And that's the big awakening that is happening right now, whether it's happening spontaneously, because it does happen spontaneously, or whether it's because people are integrating spiritual practices more. I mean, we're so much more connected. There's a lot of people that were actually talking about this even in the 90s, like William Donahue. I didn't even know about him until recently. And he was talking about all this stuff in the 90s, but it wasn't very popular back then because and no one cared. I feel like now everybody is gravitating towards these teachings and really towards the true teachings of Jesus Christ. And I think that just the way he was persecuted, today we still have a lot of persecution against Christians, against people that really do follow his path because again, he was radical, he was a rebel, and he stood up against everything that is wrong in this world, which shows us, how with God, we can use the sword whenever it's needed as well. It's again, life is not one big battleground, but there are battles we all fight in this incarnation, and we have to learn to discern. There was this one woman on TikTok who commented that she was a Mayan elder or a Mayan sister, and she was saying there are no lessons, there is no um, things to integrate. We are whole, everything's perfect. And I said, yeah, when you do the healing work, you realize that. But if you don't, you constantly believe God's punishing you or that there's more lessons to learn. Like if bad things, I don't see things as bad anymore. I see things as this is part of the whole. It's part of the whole. And I understand the Wheel of Fortune cycles, a couple of weeks. I was in low cycle, and last week I was in a really high cycle. This week I'm going through some changes in my body. Feels like a low cycle, and I don't even want to get out of it. I want to fully experience what I'm going through right now. Very different than a few years ago when I didn't want to experience any uncomfortableness. That's the whole thing. I think we talk so much about the nervous system that I think people think that, and I want to make sure people to understand that it's not about you feeling all love and light. I don't feel all love and light all the time. Do you?
Oh no, no. Even this week has been I've been swamped. It's just constantly one thing after another thing. Last night I wanted to go to sleep. I'm like, finally, I'm gonna go to sleep an hour earlier than normal, which is like not even that early. It was like 11 o'clock. I had a nightmare, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. And then I've had this pain in my shoulder like a week, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what is wrong with my shoulder? Like it really hurts, even asleep. And I'm like, and just swamped. But I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Just going with the process. And then there's times where everything slows down and just feeling it. There were times where I was going through very emotional stuff, problems with my husband. I'm like, why are you doing this to me, God? Or if you put me here, then let me see what I need to see. Like, but now I understand it's a process. A lot of times seeing things differently and knowing that everything has been perfect because there was something that we need to go through to be able to get to where we are today.
Yes.
And
And
unfortunately, yeah, some people have gone through really dark things. Like you said, you think you've gone through stuff, and there's others that have gone through very harsh things. And I understand it's probably like even more of a process for them to prepare themselves before they even start doing, psychedelics and ayahuasca or anything like that because it's too much for it to all come at you all at once.
while you're doing it and even afterwards, like we've been talking
Yes.
about. And in general, we need to understand that we're human beings. We're not doing this work. So, like we were talking about in the last episode about the lies we've been told about the healing. You don't regulate your nervous system so you never have emotions again. You regulate your nervous system so you can contain them. I mean, think about the emotions that your ancestors could not contain, all the grief, all the trauma, right? Your nervous system gets developed enough to be able to learn to process them without rejecting, numbing them. But it doesn't mean you're not going to feel uncomfortable. I think I feel more uncomfortable now on the healing journey than I when I wasn't. Why? Because now everything's very obvious, very aware. But by the same token, it's like God makes it so that everything makes sense. Everything that I'm going through, it's like, oh, I get it. I didn't have that awareness before because I was always resisting the present. We have to really understand our emotions are not bad. And whether you're on the journey through a psychedelic experience, you're not going in there to get rid of your emotions. So we have to be very careful about that. There's a crazy movie. I think it was done in 2013. I forgot the name of it, but basically it's these people, it's a society who doesn't want to feel emotions anymore, and the government convinced them and they give them a shot and they don't feel emotions anymore. They all live the same, they all dress the same, they all have the same end houses because that's what's going to reduce crime. And one guy wakes up from this and is like, this is not what I want in my life. I want to feel. So doing this work is not going to get you so you never ever have a bad emotion again. It's so that you stop judging them as bad. And why? I think at the core is what we've been saying is that you have a great relationship with God. That's that inner temple. So, I guess to close this out, what would you say to somebody that is entertaining the use of psychedelics, perhaps, or even Kundalini Yoga, which can feel like a psychedelic experience?
I would honestly tell them they need to start that inner work first
Mm,
before they even consider that. Just because even just doing the inner work can be very triggering
mm,
because you don't know what's going to come. Sometimes you don't even know. You disassociate from what really is, or you only know what you know because that's what you were taught and that's what you saw growing up. So it's something that needs to be respected, just like with anything else. Yes, it's a plant. God put it here on earth for a reason. It has to have some kind of healing benefits to it, but people need to really respect it. And it's not, I feel it's not being respected by many, and that's kind of scary and it's worrisome. But just do that, start that inner journey within. That
yeah.
inner journey is going to guide you automatically. And especially if you believe in God, He's going to guide you to where you need to be and the people that need to come into your life. And do your research. Don't just believe like, oh, I'm just gonna go down the street because they can give me ayahuasca and I'll just go home and like, oh no, like I would rather go with a shaman and for them to guide me through the whole process that they know what they're actually doing and because they have an idea what's gonna come up or what's gonna happen and how to handle the whole situation.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I mean, I can't even add anything to that because I was just dead on 100%. I think discernment is key. Psychedelics, like we said, can be a doorway, but the path has to be consciously walked, and you have to understand that you can't control what is shown to you. And we have to also take it back to last week's episode that healing is about sovereignty, whether it's through plant medicine or dedicated practice. The real work isn't showing up for yourself in devotion, and it's every day, not because you're fixing something that's broken. It's because, again, it's this connection that you have with God. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to have a dedicated devotion to your inner temple through meditation? So overall, I would say this entire conversation is more about sovereignty and empowerment. It's not about dependency. Are powerful. I'm not gonna lie. And one day, very soon, they're gonna be approved by to be used legally in a therapeutic setting. I mark my words, in a few years, we're gonna see these clinicals or these clinics around the world, and especially in the United States. But they're not always the answer for everyone. They don't heal just like yoga, they reveal. So whether you walk the path of plant medicine or not, what matters is how you integrate and embody the lessons of healing. And that is not something that you can rush. So if you have any questions, comments, let us know below in the comments here. We'd love to assist in answering any questions. I definitely cannot recommend like a specific center or anything like that because it's none of my business. Everybody should make those own decisions on their own. But I can share my story, and as well as you sharing your story about the Kundalini Yoga perspective is just so powerful. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. It's an honor to have these conversations with Elvira every week. And the way that this movement is growing, it just makes my heart so happy because I feel that so many women are so ready to talk about these things. And I know that it's very, very difficult because we don't want to feel labeled as broken or feel labeled as something is wrong with us. But from the bottom of our hearts, we want to thank you all for your beautiful comments, for the shares and the likes. Subscribe so that you're notified every time we go live. And if you yourself are navigating through this journey, then you can always join us at Satori Vitality and Spirituality. That's our monthly membership community where we integrate the practices of Kundalini Yoga as well as A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy to help you on your own generational healing journey. So join us there. Link will be in the comments, and we will see you all again next week. Satnam, everyone.